In the mid-1960s, the American underworld stood at a crossroads. Old guard syndicates, steeped in generations of secrecy, found themselves under unprecedented legal scrutiny, even as new opportunities in gambling and entertainment offered vast fortunes. This true crime chronicle explores the web spun by organized crime during that tumultuous time, when notorious kingpins wrestled for control of illicit operations stretching from Harlem policy rackets to the neon-lit heart of Las Vegas. Through dark history and underworld secrets, we trace how these crime families navigated mounting federal pressure, vying to preserve a way of life shaped by cunning deals and hidden alliances. From the hush-hush, Little Appalachian gathering to whispered contracts in smoky backrooms, the stage was set for a battle of wits and influence unlike any America had seen before. Shadows on the Strip, early 1965. By the start of 1965, the bright lights of Las Vegas concealed deep ties to criminal syndicates. The iconic Strip had become an intersection where old-school mafiosi brushed shoulders with entrepreneurs seeking to legitimize gambling. Caesar's Palace, shimmering with promise, symbolized the city's glitz while quietly attracting underworld attention. Figures like Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno, long rumored to be a heavyweight in the Vito Genovese network, found direct or indirect ways to profit from the city's booming tourism. Rumors spread that if anyone placed a bet large enough to catch federal eyes, a portion of those profits would trace back to infamous syndicates pulling strings behind the scenes. Though Las Vegas had been courting more respectable investors for years, criminals remained deeply embedded in gaming halls. In whispered conversations, names like Vincent "Jimmy Blue Eyes" Allo circulated among pit bosses, dealers, and major bookmakers. Industry insiders knew that this man carried weight with the real mafia stories folks. Allo's rumored presence, combined with Salerno's silent influence, erupted into speculation about who truly reaped a share of the proceeds from newly risen casinos. For many starry-eyed tourists, the glimmer of the Strip masked a darker story, one that hinged on unsolved mysteries and cunning deals made in penthouse suites. In Florida, too, the dice never stopped rolling. Towns like Miami and Hallandale were swept up in an underbelly teeming with flux. Criminal power brokers capable of bridging the distance between Harlem's illegal numbers games and the casinos of Nevada recognized Florida's potential for expansion. A swirl of rumors alluded to crime families mobilizing assets, establishing new fronts, and ensuring that illegal proceeds found safe harbor in real estate. As 1965 dawned, the stage stood set for an audacious meeting that would define the landscape of organized gambling for the rest of the decade. Palm Springs Prelude, October 1965. Palm Springs exuded elegance, sun-soaked villas, desert breezes, and wealthy visitors seeking retreat from the bustle of Los Angeles. Yet beneath this idyllic surface, a clandestine assembly of gamblers and underworld secrets was about to unfold. The federal government, ever watchful, soon marked it as the Little Appalachian Affair, a label evoking the infamous 1957 Appalachian meeting that had first exposed the mafia's national influence. This desert gathering brought together individuals rumored to be key players in major organized crime circles. Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno once again emerged in these hush-hush circles. Observers believed his presence wasn't mere coincidence. His silhouette had been spotted at various gambling hubs across California and Nevada, leaving many to assume that the meeting involved crucial decisions regarding the future of national betting operations. Alongside Salerno stood Vincent "Jimmy Blue Eyes" Allo, thought by some investigators to be a central figure bridging the gap between old East Coast operators and West Coast expansions. For a week, these men and their associates allegedly gathered to carve up territories, address brewing rivalries in bookmaking, and even discuss rumored ownership stakes in Caesar's Palace. But these summits weren't just about dividing gambling interests. High drama over alliances with showgirls and future deals in the neon desert triggered tension in smoky living rooms, where phone lines buzzed with wagers placed across state lines. Women like actress Victoria Lockwood and showgirl Carolyn Kimura were rumored to pass from room to room, perhaps overhearing details they scarcely understood yet recognized as dangerous. Others, like Jerome "Jerry" Zarowitz, who carried a history of gambling convictions, appeared in the corner shadows. Elliot Paul Price, connected to notorious high-stakes deals, likewise hovered around the edges. While cigarettes burned to their filters and men hammered out terms beneath crystal chandeliers, the outside world was oblivious to the labyrinthine decisions quietly taking shape. The mixture of Hollywood glamour and lethal criminality made the gathering a subject of intense speculation. Federal investigators later booked some participants for perjury, contending these men had lied about the purpose and scope of the meeting. It soon became clear that, with the FBI hot on their trail, such large gatherings were a formidable risk. Regardless, the allure of controlling a growing market overcame caution. Secret alliances took shape in closed-door sessions, ties to the Las Vegas Strip deepened, and the outlines of a powerful new synergy emerged. Within months, the tentacles of infamous syndicates would become even more apparent. Beneath the scorching desert sun in Nevada, the humid beaches of Florida, and the bustling streets of New York City. Bolita, bookies, and big risks, late 1965, early 1966. Shifting to East Harlem and Spanish Harlem, an altogether different empire of unsolved mysteries and gambling thrived. This wasn't the neon dazzle of the Strip, but the gritty hustle of the numbers racket, an evolved form of policy gambling. Daytime operations, nighttime draws, separate banks to handle different betting lines. A complex structure allowed those in higher echelons to hoard significant wealth. Among these masterminds was Raymond Spanish John Marquez, rumored to move millions annually through cunning deals and countless underlings. Newspapers across the eastern seaboard reported a steady barrage of arrests, a bookie here, a local runner there, but the kingpins seemed elusive. Investigators claimed that profits from these inner-city gambling networks often found their way into the pockets of men like Anthony Salerno or other bosses in the Vito Genovese orbit. By 1966, rumblings from local law enforcement suggested that black neighborhoods placing daily wagers on these numbers effectively fueled a white-run racket. Concerned citizens questioned why so many high-towering criminals, frequently shielded by wealth and political connections, continued to thrive while small-time punters filled local jails. That same year, syndicated columnist Jack Anderson drew attention to intense changes on the Strip in Las Vegas, courtesy of men like Howard Hughes, who hoped to clean things up by buying out entire casinos. Yet despite legitimate business expansions, old habits died hard. Jacobson, identified as a figure behind Caesars Palace's creation, evidently tried to distance the hotel casino from known mob financiers. Federal investigators, though, kept sniffing around. Reports described how Jerome Zarowitz, once tied to attempts at fixing professional sports, maintained relationships with Anthony Salerno, forging a discreet pipeline of booking operations. Even with big new players stepping in, the city's old dark history refused to vanish. In the background, local-level controversies also simmered, some involving flamboyant arrests or rumored bribery. In Miami, scathing exposés by dedicated reporters painted a picture of official corruption entangled with the mafia's unstoppable expansion. One article uncovered a lieutenant of Salerno with direct ties to massive gambling banks in Harlem. Another piece revealed how certain Florida sheriffs or local politicians allegedly turned a blind eye to underworld secrets in exchange for bribes. In short, the structures built during Prohibition-era bootlegging were far from dismantled. They had simply evolved into modern, multi-state, infamous syndicates that used sophisticated methods to remain undetected for as long as possible. Showbiz meets the syndicate, mid-1966. By the midpoint of 1966, the nexus between organized crime and show business drew even greater public attention. Habitually, press outlets uncovered stories of mob-linked talent scouts who corralled large crowds to support popular performers. One tale involving Frank Sinatra Jr. performing at a suburban venue underscored how gangsters like Sonny Franzese orchestrated entire nights of crowd padding, bringing in bookies, loan sharks, and lesser criminals as part of a spectacle. The hush-hush knowledge among observers was that these financiers possessed the capital to influence a performer's entire career. Stumble out of favor, and one might never get another singing gig in a top nightclub. Remain in favor, and star status could be guaranteed. Young hopefuls struggling to break through in the entertainment world often encountered impossible bills, publicists, studios, managers, outfits, so they turned to money men rumored to have dark history connections. That intangible lure, the promise of stardom, kept them in tow. Indeed, many who sought success swore they had glimpsed the packed crowd phenomenon firsthand, where mob associates magically filled a venue, boosting the performer's reputation. Journalists discovered that established stars might also be forced to navigate these turbulent waters. Frank Sinatra Sr. had long faced murmurings about old ties to men like Willie Moretti, links that never fully vanished from the public's mind. Nightclubs, recording deals, and even jukebox routes were often ensnared in this clandestine control. Venues across New York and Florida provided perfect money laundering frontiers. Meanwhile, powerful mafia figures, Anthony Salerno among them, found ways to invest in the music scene. They saw the entertainment circuit as a profitable, if occasionally messy, extension of their gambling empires. Even the driving novelty craze of the time, The Twist by Chubby Checker, became embroiled in scandal as Checker's label was alleged to have ties to underworld channels. Inevitably, the government took action. Leveraging new legal strategies, prosecutors extended immunity to certain minor or mid-level players. This tactic forced them to testify without fear of prosecution. If they still refused to speak, they could face contempt citations and land in jail indefinitely, similar to how some big fish had been cornered. Though unsolved mysteries remained, the tools for shining a spotlight on underworld dealings advanced. Investigations soon pointed to a recurring theme. Even as talented crooners, showgirls, and playwrights soared to stardom, many soared on the wings of notorious kingpins, risky bets, and booming bookmakers, late 1966. Throughout the latter half of 1966, a wave of coverage spotlighted the fearless and occasionally reckless bookmakers who handled enormous wagers on pro sports. One such story centered on a New Rochelle accountant who accepted colossal football bets. The FBI eventually uncovered that the accountant possessed intricate phone setups, bouncing calls across state lines. Federal attorneys insisted he was among the biggest bookies on the East Coast. This individual's audacity symbolized a broader shift. As more people craved high-stakes wagers, lines soared, and major criminals took note. Observers marveled at what they deemed double lives. These men lived in serene suburbs, presenting themselves as typical neighbors to unsuspecting families. But behind the veneer, they orchestrated million-dollar crime families networks that spanned multiple states. The entire arrangement teetered on secrecy. Wiretaps, coded calls, P.O. boxes in unassuming strip malls. A single slip-up could land them in hot water. Yet for these men, the promise of wealth overshadowed the dangers. Many even wove themselves into legitimate business pursuits, owning taverns, real estate, or small trucking warehouses to conceal the flow of dirty money. In New York, agents observed alliances between accountants running these wagers and recognized mob figures like Fat Tony Salerno. Investigators suspected that if the bookmakers grew too large or threatened to become uncontrollable, the syndicate would either co-opt them or shut them down forcibly. Initial convictions of such flamboyant bookmakers led to stiff sentences, but it hardly deterred the next wave of entrepreneurs seeking quick riches. For every high-profile bust, countless smaller ones persisted, reinforcing the overall infiltration of the underworld into mainstream society. Meanwhile, in Florida, rumors spread that certain local officials or entire sheriff's departments were complicit in these cross-state gambling operations. Bolita rackets, once perceived as old-fashioned, continued churning out money among working-class folks who hoped a small wager might magically free them from poverty. Federal investigators lamented the extent of bribery, claiming their efforts were undermined at every turn by insiders who tipped off ringleaders. The swirl of corruption only fueled the synergy between organized gambling, political structures, and the impetus for thorough investigations that might blow the entire enterprise wide open. The Florida Crime Tree, early to mid-1966. While the neon allure of Las Vegas drew considerable national attention, an equally intricate tapestry of organized crime was flourishing in Florida. Veteran characters who once thrived during Prohibition had reinvented themselves in the Sunshine State. During that wild era, men like Meyer Lansky rose from obscure backgrounds to shape entire underworld economies. Then, as the liquor trade legalized, many simply pivoted into gambling, jukebox ownership, or filmmaking. By 1966, Florida's warm coastlines had become fertile ground not just for retirees, but for cunning criminals who recognized how to cloak their fortunes through real estate deals or tourism fronts. Newspaper exposés emphasized how these money trees wound between older northern mafiosi and local Florida entrepreneurs in Broward County and beyond. The owners of certain coin-operated devices, once used primarily for slot machines or small amusements, transitioned into advanced fun machines that, while seemingly innocent, often channeled illegal profits. Meanwhile, elaborate corporate structures, some with offices as far away as Chicago or New York, were rumored to funnel capital to Florida-based gambling dens. Lansky's name surfaced more than once. He was said to maintain a web of bank accounts overseas, carefully orchestrating deals that allowed him to funnel profits from in-state operations to neutral corners of the world. Associates like Vincent Allo, reputed to be among the last men standing from the Prohibition Wars, co-managed segments of these intriguing expansions. Thanks to new devices like Scopitone, an early form of music video jukebox, the syndicate discovered fresh ways to spin a profit, bridging entertainment and graft in novel ways. Amid these games of shadows, local reformers struggled to keep track of who owned what and who owed what to whom. The deeper investigators looked, the more tangled the Florida crime tree became. Alvin Malnick's rise, mid to late 1966. At the center of Florida's labyrinthine alliances stood Alvin Malnick, a young attorney with a knack for forging beneficial relationships. Newly minted from law school, Malnick displayed a shrewd business sense that swiftly caught the attention of powerful fixers, gamblers, and notorious kingpins in the area. Though he flaunted only modest beginnings, Malnick's submersion into second mortgage brokering started drawing the interest of investigative reporters not long after he passed the bar. Not content to remain on the sidelines, Malnick bought real estate, dabbled in corporate dealings, and eventually earned a seat in lavish offices on Lincoln Road, Miami Beach. He forged relationships with known gamblers who used mortgage companies to launder funds or finance expansions. At the time, rumors swirled that Malnick had a direct line to men like Fat Tony Salerno and other suspected mob heavyweights. Some believed Malnick was integral in bridging legitimate business deals with under-the-table negotiations, effectively ensuring that suspicious parties could keep investing in new enterprises while outwardly complying with mainstream regulations. A hallmark of Malnick's success was the friendship theory he frequently espoused. He claimed that forging close professional and personal bonds propelled one's prospects more than anything else. Indeed, Malnick's circle encompassed an eclectic mix: union heads, lawyers, bankers, and entertainment impresarios. If favored by the right people, a wave of capital and connectedness opened doors swiftly. One of Malnick's major breakthroughs was his involvement with Scopitone machines, those early coin-operated music video platforms. Observers marveled that Malnick managed to corner the U.S. rights. He soon flipped a lucrative share to Telesign Inc., an already profitable Chicago-based outfit. Such moves reaped millions and further solidified Malnick's unstoppable climb. The more Malnick grew in prominence, the more investigative reporters chased him. Discussion of possible alliances with older gangland overseers remained persistent. Authorities contended he was part of a new generation of cunning operators, well-educated, business-savvy, and not afraid to rub elbows with men who traced their mafia lineage to the days of bootlegging. In the face of swirling controversy, Malnick pressed forward. He expanded his holdings, boasted about synergy between top entertainment agencies, and scooped up stock in various exotic ventures. Reformers similarly clamored for deeper probes, yet each investigation seemed to strengthen Malnick's mystique. He had the resources and the friendships to sidestep or survive most legal tangles. Florida would continue to see the impacts of his shrewd negotiations for years to come. Hidden stakes in Caesar's Palace, mid-1966. The opening of Caesar's Palace promised to redefine luxury wagering on the Las Vegas Strip. Built at a cost of millions, its opulent design invoked ancient Roman grandeur with marble columns, lavish fountains, and carefully orchestrated illusions of power. Yet behind the scenes, state gaming authorities worried that parts of the financing stemmed from infamous syndicates. Whispers circulated that shadowy players, some from Chicago, others from the East Coast, had under-the-table arrangements with official license holders. By mid-August 1966, certain newspaper reports exposed 8 gangster figures holding secret stakes in the brand-new palace. These revelations, which named Salvatore Momo Giancana, linked to Chicago, Raymond Patriarca, domineering in New England, and Anthony Salerno, of the Vito Genovese circle, fueled public outrage. Officials realized that skimming might be siphoning significant amounts of untaxed winnings straight into the pockets of criminals. The method was simple enough: removing a portion of the gambling floor's profits before they were officially recorded. Over time, that portion amounted to millions untraceable by the government. Despite the intense publicity and an undercurrent of fear, Caesar's Palace refused to close. Tourists flocked to its lavish gaming tables, downing expensive cocktails and living out desert fantasies. When confronted by the press, the hotel's lead figure, Nathan Jacobson, denied any knowledge of underworld infiltration. He'd penned furious telegrams to newspapers demanding corrections, insisting that allegations of mafia infiltration were baseless. But print media fought back, swirling evidence that travelers were flown in courtesy of gangster-run junkets, each gambler's loss generating a tidy commission that lined criminal pockets. As these details came to light, Nevada officials promised thorough investigations, though cynics argued that enough payoffs might keep everything afloat. For the moment, it appeared that Caesar's shining palace was partly built on alliances few in mainstream business dared to publicly acknowledge. The Diary of Anne Drummond, late 1966. In October 1966, another bombshell dropped. An intimately revealing diary emerged, written by Anne Drummond, the second wife of Michael "Trigger Mike" Coppola. Coppola was rumored to be a cunning leader with a violent streak, gleaning his wealth from East Harlem's numbers rackets before pivoting to Florida-based expansions. His wife's diary, long suppressed out of fear and mafia intimidation, described the daily life of a man who meticulously counted thousands in illicit profits at home while maintaining an image of respectability. Anne recounted nights of terror where any perceived slight could unleash Mike Coppola's fury. On one occasion, a single comment at a dinner party purportedly drove him into a rage. Allegedly, he seized a gun, fired a shot at her, and hurled vicious insults. She survived that night, but it underscored the savage extremes that lurked behind domestic walls. The diary also documented how she endured coerced abortions performed by a clandestine doctor, each one a horrifying reminder of her husband's power. Despite these abuses, Coppola showered her with gifts: diamonds, furs, wads of cash. Here was the dark history of a woman trapped by the lavish cruelty of an underworld secrets lifestyle. What truly rattled investigators was the testament to broad mafia connections. Anecdotes in the diary named big players: Frank Costello, Lucky Luciano in exile, and indeed a Tony, identified by some reporters as Anthony Salerno. The text painted a mosaic where wives, girlfriends, and silent partners circled these men's orbits, sometimes forging bonds of mutual dependence. The more it revealed, the clearer it became that these criminals lived at a level far beyond street brawls. They coexisted with major politicians, purchased Florida mansions, and seized the best seats at high-profile clubs. Anne's revelations ended tragically. Feeling cornered, she left for Europe. Her death in Rome, deemed a suicide, left pressing questions about how many chilling secrets she took to the grave. Meanwhile, Trigger Mike's funeral was so quiet that even federal agents missed it for several days. Shrouded in secrecy until the last moment, his departure from this world aligned neatly with the life he led, a silent, lethal presence overshadowing all who encountered him. The diary was one of the few glimpses into that private realm, a raw testament to how easily the machinery of crime devours personal lives. Perjury and showdowns in Palm Springs, early 1967, late 1968. As 1967 unfolded, investigative threads from the 1965 Palm Springs Little Appalachian meeting continued to produce dramatic showdowns in federal courts. One figure at the center was Ruby Fat Ruby Lazarus, a longtime Miami bookmaker. Initially, Lazarus had refused to testify about attending that desert gathering, earning a contempt of court charge and a 7-month jail stint. Eventually given immunity, he did speak, but federal prosecutors believed he lied, especially regarding his phone usage during the assembly and the nature of the discussions that took place. Witnesses emerged to contradict Lazarus's statements. A showgirl with ties to the meeting detailed how Lazarus spent a significant amount of time on the phone, making wagers and discussing gambling debts. Coupled with phone records linking him to certain Miami bookmakers, the prosecution hammered away, arguing Lazarus had consciously obstructed the investigation. The FBI had recognized the significance of the meeting from the start. With individuals like Allo, Salerno, and various top-tier bookmakers in one place, it suggested a strategic gathering crucial to crime families' operations. By 1968, Lazarus was found guilty of perjury. He faced multiple years behind bars, plus heavy fines. Although some charges were dropped, the conviction proved once more that the government would use every legal tactic, immunity, court orders, grand juries, to pry open the underworld's secrets. Lazarus appealed, temporarily remaining free, but the message was clear. The Palm Springs affair had hammered home a reality. Mafia big shots weren't invincible if the feds connected enough dots. Meanwhile, newspapers brimmed with accounts of showgirls, hotel managers, and even houseboys testifying about unusual gatherings, large-scale gambling debts, and phone calls that extended from LA to Miami and beyond. Tensions flared further when federal agents took aim at others believed to have participated in the clandestine meeting. Some invoked their Fifth Amendment rights. Others tried to cut deals by naming bigger fish. The result was a swirl of partial truths, omissions, and outright lies, culminating in perjury indictments. While the entire affair didn't fully dismantle the national network of gamblers it exposed, it chipped away at the underworld's confidence, underscoring that even carefully staged gatherings risked infiltration and high-profile convictions. The $25 million policy racket, mid-1968. Although hidden gatherings made headlines, street-level gambling in places like New York remained a colossal piece of the puzzle. In mid-1968, the arrest of Raymond Spanish John Marquez illuminated just how lucrative these policy rackets could be. Federal investigators believed Marquez ran a labyrinth pulling in $25 million per year across Harlem and Spanish Harlem, a figure so staggering that it dwarfed prior assumptions of how profitable these numbers games could be. Decked in fine suits and owning a large yacht, Marquez embodied a new breed of gambler, one who moved across social boundaries while retaining the lethal backing of men like Salerno. Caught stepping into his Lincoln Continental near the 79th Street Marina, Marquez faced a federal bench warrant triggered by a 2-year investigation. Agents rummaging through his vehicle allegedly discovered an enormous sum of cash. The picture was complete. Sophisticated operations in the heart of the city, a stable of subordinates who kept the wheels turning, the unwavering power of the mafia in the background. Federal prosecutors chalked up his success to cunning, daytime and nighttime banks, meticulously separated, polished record-keeping, and hush money presumably paid to keep certain officials at bay. His story not only underscored the profitability of policy gambling, but also showed how modern these operations had become. Marquez, for instance, was rumored to handle separate finances for each round of bets, ensuring minimal overlap that could alert investigators. As the case progressed, it gave the public a rare glimpse into how high-level policy rackets bridged multiple states. The question, often repeated in shocked newspaper editorials, was how many other Spanish Johns existed in the city. If one man's enterprise generated $25 million a year, just how deep did these infamous syndicates run? George Wackenhut and Florida's Deep Corruption, 1967. Meanwhile, back in Florida, the momentum to expose real mafia stories and political misconduct gained new life under George Wackenhut, the so-called crime war general appointed by Governor Claude Kirk. With a private security background, Wackenhut carried an almost fanatical zeal for rooting out wrongdoing. In public statements, he accused numerous sheriffs and county officials of enabling or actively participating in illegal gambling activities, especially Bolita. He cited a constant battle. Whenever investigators closed in, a network of bribed officials would tip off the criminals. What truly captured headlines was Wackenhut's claim that high-ranking mafia members like Santo Trafficante Jr. and Meyer Lansky had effectively turned Florida into a strategic command center. The synergy among these men, bridging Tampa, Orlando, and Miami, ensured a steady flow of illicit income. Wackenhut unveiled lists with dozens of names, linking them to alleged organized crime infiltration in real estate, hospitality, and local politics. Critics questioned whether his crusade was grandstanding. Yet arrests started piling up. Bagmen nabbed while delivering payoffs, officials forced into resignation for ignoring illegal gambling parlor operations. All the while, accusations of partisanship flew across the aisles. In a state dominated by one party, Wackenhut pointed out that entrenched power structures allowed corruption to fester unchallenged. His supporters championed him as a much-needed reformer. Adversaries painted him as an overreaching zealot. By the end of 1967, talk shifted to possibly creating a statewide crime board or a Florida Department of Justice. Although the ultimate success of these efforts remained uncertain, the spotlight on Florida hammered home a crucial truth. Crime in the Sunshine State was more than just a local matter. It was intricately tied to national networks, from the harbors of Miami to the counting rooms of Las Vegas. A dire testimony, May 1967. Wackenhut intensified matters the following spring by testifying before legislative committees. Naming over 50 top criminals, including legendary figures like Santo Trafficante Jr. and Meyer Lansky, he painted a stark portrait of entrenched power. According to Wackenhut, Florida served as a vital corridor linking the East Coast crime families to operations in the Bahamas and beyond. His statements ignited furious debate, and newspapers devoured every word. Some in Florida's government demanded further research, claiming existing agencies were ill-equipped to battle an organization so vast and cunning. Indeed, the mafia's grip seemed especially tight in places like Tampa and Orlando, where investigators claimed a single subordinate could oversee beta gambling lines that stretched beyond the city limits. Alleged infiltration of local police departments only compounded the problem. The difficulties in verifying each claim led some senior lawmakers to proceed with caution, yet public frustration mounted. Each new wave of revelations built the narrative. These unsolved mysteries dotted the entire state, overshadowing beaches and tourist attractions. Wackenhut's supporters saw him as a folk hero crusading against corruption. Skeptics labeled him alarmist. However, with each major bust and every tipster stepping forward, the swirling claims about mafia infiltration grew harder to dismiss. By mid-1967, it was impossible to avoid the notion that Florida, like Las Vegas, was in the throes of an epoch-defining clash between organized crime families and an embattled legal system fighting to preserve democracy in the face of well-funded, deeply rooted corruption. Fallout and infamy, late 1968-1969. As the decade drew toward its end, federal agents continued tightening the noose around suspected underworld figures. Higher-than-ever convictions for perjury illustrated how lying to a grand jury could become a gangster's worst downfall. The Lazarus case in Los Angeles hammered that message home. After a flash trial and repeated testimonies by showgirls and gamblers alike, Fat Ruby was slapped with prison time and heavy fines for obstructing justice. Investigators saw it as a milestone, a testament that no one was completely out of reach. Yet infamous syndicates still boasted an uncanny ability to regroup. Caesar's Palace, under new management, faced repeated allegations that mob-connected men were pulling strings, occasionally rotating in fresh frontmen to satisfy licensing boards. The Stardust and the Dunes had parallel stories. While a veneer of legitimate operators steered official decisions, suspicious behind-the-scenes partnerships churned on. Where legitimate owners faltered, the older generation of racketeers moved in to keep the money river flowing. Skimming, hush-hush loan deals, orchestrated junket flights, and more continued swirling beneath the glare of neon signage. The dark history of Vegas lived on, refusing to be fully exorcised. By 1969, columns by investigative reporters like Jack Anderson dissected the changes in Vegas. Industrial magnates such as Howard Hughes had indeed purchased multiple properties, attempting to sanitize the industry. But the infiltration persisted. Jerky transitions in management, new corporate boards, tricky licensing loopholes, all provided breathing room for cunning criminals who merely adapted. Some aligned themselves with out-of-state capital. Others masked their presence behind shell companies. The synergy of real mafia stories and legitimate business remained a hallmark of the city's identity. People wanting a fun weekend rarely questioned which figures lurked in quiet back rooms, counting unreported take and planning expansions to the next big thing. And in Florida, Governor Kirk's attempts at statewide reforms triggered fierce backlash from politicians and citizens who disagreed on how far the government should intrude. Large pockets of the public tired of talk. They wanted results, a genuine dismantling of these crime families. But as each year closed, the Hydra-like structure of organized crime sprouted new heads. While a handful of large arrests made headlines, smaller-time operators popped up to fill the void. Meanwhile, older leaders like Santo Traficante Jr. or Meyer Lansky continued to maneuver in the shadows, employing younger protégés who embraced modern technology for gambling networks. Glitz, glamour, and hidden deals, 1969 and beyond. In 1969, it became evident that the synergy between showbiz, gambling, and the underworld secrets would endure. Legendary crooners still performed in nightclubs rumored to have mafia backers. Starlets sometimes found themselves charmed by questionable benefactors, discovering only too late that these men demanded lasting loyalty. Meanwhile, the public's appetite for entertainment overshadowed calls for deeper accountability. People still tuned in to see iconic performers on stage, momentarily ignoring the swirl of rumors that the lavish sets and orchestrated applause were financed by the same men indicted for racketeering in New York or Chicago. With the decade heading to a close, Las Vegas advanced into an era of reinvention. Family-friendly marketing ramps tried to overshadow the scandal-laced stories of theft, murder, and cheating. Supposedly, one could bring their children to the glimmering casinos. But even as new hotels under corporate ownership rose, the mostly invisible web connecting them back to old mafia money never disappeared fully. No matter how many industrial titans or corporations tried to sanitize the city, the dark history of the gangster-run era cast a long shadow. Some crusading attorneys insisted that unrelenting pressure would, in time, rid the gambling world of back-alley dealings. Others claimed that the entire gambling economy was simply too lucrative, ensuring that notorious kingpins would continue to find ways to maintain a foothold. For each indicted gangster, it seemed there was a fresh up-and-comer eager to claim the vacated seat. The circle of infiltration continued, weaving from Florida's coastlines to the New York boroughs and across the desert highways to California's sun-scorched enclaves. Legacy of a turbulent time. Though the late 1960s would soon yield to the shifting cultural tides of the 1970s, the events chronicled here demonstrated that real mafia stories extended well beyond any single city's border. Men like Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno, Vincent "Jimmy Blue Eyes" Allo, Santo Traficante Jr., and Meyer Lansky had carved out influential fiefdoms that shaped America's gambling economy. Their approach to business, blending intimidation, corruption, and occasional charity, left indelible marks on the communities they touched. The infiltration of show business, through forced crowd turnout or hush-hush record label investments, underscored that no corner of the nation's cultural life was safe from infamous syndicates. In Florida, the rapid growth in population and tourism fed new layers of complexity, allowing criminals to cloak illegal operations behind a facade of condo developments or posh restaurants. Elsewhere, diaries and confessions from battered spouses provided glimpses into a world where wealth and violence walked hand in hand. Meanwhile, the bright spectacle of the Las Vegas Strip promised curious travelers an escape from reality. Yet behind that facade lay the timeless tension of organized crime families jockeying for power and profit. Even as major capitalists purchased swaths of the city, a portion of the old way clung stubbornly to life. For certain residents in East Harlem, Spanish Harlem, or the number-saturated neighborhoods of Chicago, it was hard to believe that law enforcement would ever truly root out the big bosses. Yes, headline-grabbing arrests and convictions occasionally erupted, but those typically addressed the middle tier of the pyramid. The top rung consistently took cover behind multiple layers of secrecy, hush money, and opportunistic lawyers well-versed in navigating legal gray zones. And so, The empire of clandestine gambling survived, sometimes overshadowed by political changes or overshadowed by cultural shifts, but always adaptively forging new ties in the darkness. At times, investigative reporters attempted to piece together just how much money changed hands each year. Was it millions? Tens of millions? Hundreds? The web of shell corporations, double sets of books, and local law enforcement corruption made it nearly impossible to arrive at an exact figure. But the constant swirl of true crime elements, from suspicious murders down to a ubiquitous fear that no one could be trusted, lent the entire era a quality of high drama. Beyond the end. By the close of 1969, Americans had witnessed assassinations of political leaders, the cultural upheavals of the decade, and the expansion of war overseas. And yet, the underworld secrets behind the national gambling scene remained an unsettling fixture. Trial after trial highlighted the cunning of men who could rig sporting events, launder fortunes in casinos, or make or break a rising singer's career with a single phone call. The synergy between criminal wealth and mainstream society soared, even as the FBI and U.S. attorneys boasted more potent legal tools. Though some major players like Giancana faced forced exiles, or men like Frank Costello saw their empire fade, others rose to fill the vacuum. In the end, the story of these crime families demonstrates both their resilience and the authorities' constant vigilance. From the hush-hush 1965 summit in Palm Springs to swanky parties in Manhattan high-rises, the criminals adapted with cunning. The truth behind their tidy suits, big smiles, and respectable facades was a never-ending grind of bribes, payoffs, intimidation, and cunning business deals. Modern American history might paint the mid-1960s as a time of social revolution and progressive moves toward justice. Yet in the quiet corridors far from protest marches or legislative reforms, the notorious kingpins shaped local and national economies, forging alliances with complacent politicians and unscrupulous financiers. And so, the dark history of that era, one rife with vendettas, secret diaries, front-page arrests, illusions, and backroom deals, stands as a testament to how deeply woven organized crime became in the American tapestry. The narratives of these men and the countless associates in their orbit remain a true crime saga that continues to captivate new generations. Perhaps the final lesson is the most chilling. As long as enormous sums of money can be made from gambling, prostitution, or entertainment, there will likely be others stepping forward to take up the mantle left behind by the men of that storied era.